Happy Internal Audit Month. Welcome to this special series of Impact Legacy with me, Rania. In celebration of our profession and out of love for the profession, I'm launching a special podcast series to shine a light on where internal audit truly stands today and what do we need to do to shape the future. I am honored to be a recipient of the Internal Audit Beacon Award. I have brought together the 2025 Audit Beacon Award recipients for an unprecedented global conversation. 4 episodes, 4 themes, 1 shared purpose. We can turn AI into a strategic sparring partner, our own strategic partner, just like we want to be a strategic partner for the business.
Who's accountable? Where are the risks? What are the risks? These things don't change. What changes under AI is their speed, their evidence, their velocity.
We can't overemphasize on the risk of all things fraud and blind spots in organization, driven amongst others by all things AI.
Now when we have the AI, I'm really happy, and at the end it's tools to support me. We cannot rely on it.
You know you're meant for more. More meaning, more influence, more impact. Welcome to Impact Legacy with Rania. I'm Rania 𝗏𝗧𝗧𝗏, board advisor and mentor to leaders globally. I'm here to show you how to stand out, shine, and lead with more authenticity, heart, and joy. Join me and my guests as we share inspiring human stories and decode the mindset and strategies you need to build trust, influence at the top table, and claim your impact in the AI era. Your legacy starts now. Let's begin. Welcome to Impact Legacy with me, Rania, and happy Internal Audit Month. This is episode 204 of the special Audit Beacon Award series for Audit Month. The theme for today is what is emerging, AI, technology, and acceleration of risks, which we'll look at together. The world is changing fast, and AI is developing at incredible speed. And AI brings new risks for organizations and jobs, but it also brings tremendous opportunities. And in internal audit, we need to seize those opportunities. Personally, I am very excited about AI and the horizon it opens for our profession. But we must also ensure we have the right guardrails in place and that our organizations are resilient and that we never outsource our judgment or decision making to the machines. Because while technology and AI are transforming our profession, the real differentiator will still be us, people, and human judgment. So let's explore this together. I'm your host, Rania 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏. I'm joining you from London. I'm a 3 times former Chief Audit and Risk Executive globally, and now a global advisor, speaker, trainer, and mentor working with boards and leadership teams to elevate internal audit, risk, and governance. I'm honored to be a recipient of the Internal Audit Beacon Award in 2025 and to have been named a woman to watch in GRC and risk management in 2026. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by 3 fellow Audit Beacon recipients. First, I'd love to welcome Dr. Ursula Schmidt. Ursula joins us from Luxembourg. She's a former Chief Internal Auditor and Chief Compliance Officer at RTL Group, a leading global entertainment company. She now serves as an independent non-executive director in the financial sector and is a board member of the IIA Luxembourg. She's recognized as a voice in audit, ethics, and compliance, and Ursula's been honored with the Internal Audit Beacon Award in 23, 24, and 25.
Thank you, Rania, for inviting us all. It's a great pleasure, and it's nice to have this 4 people around. Really happy to be here and to share and to listen.
Wonderful to have you here, Ursula. Next, I'd love to welcome 𝗘𝗽𝗏𝗏 𝗏𝗃. 𝗘𝗽𝗏 joins us from Saudi Arabia. She's an executive leader in internal audit, risk, and governance with experience transforming audit functions across aviation, banking, transportation, and government. She advises boards and leadership on governance, ethics, and organizational resilience, aligning best practices with the ambitions of Vision 2030 in Saudi Arabia. 𝗔𝗂𝗱 is also the founder of the Audit Mentor Community and a recipient of the Internal Audit Beacon Award.
Thank you, Rania, for this initiative. It's really amazing to be with each other in this day and having these topics. Thank you very much for hosting us.
Excellent. And finally, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Tom McLeod. Tom is joining us from Australia. He's an experienced Chief Risk Officer and Chief Audit Executive with more than 3 decades leading risk and internal audit functions across industries, including mining, media, manufacturing, and education. He has held senior roles at major global organizations and advises boards and executives on risk strategy, governance, and organizational resilience.
And thank you for the opportunity to join what is a great opportunity to chat about the issues that are confronting the profession at perhaps the most important time in the history of the profession.
Indeed it is. Gihan, Ursula, Tom, what a wonderful pleasure to have you here today with me. So, as you're aware, we're having these conversations gathering Audit Beacon Award recipients together. And in episode 1, we talked about what is wrong and how do we move on from there. Today, we're exploring in more depth how emerging technology, emerging risks, and emerging opportunities are shaping audit. So from AI to all the other developments happening in our world today. So I would love to start by asking you, Tom, how do you see AI reshaping business models, and what does that mean for audit and risk in particular? And how ready is internal audit to provide AI governance assurance?
Yeah, look, it's a profound question, and I think I start by saying that it will have an enormous, once in a forever impact on the business models of how all business models are operated and the risks that are generated as a consequence within those business models. For internal audit, I look at it as not a once in a career moment. I don't look at it as a once in a generation. I don't look at it as once in a lifetime. I look at it as once in the history of the profession. We are moving from human judgment to an automated judgment world. And yeah, that's something that would be great to explore a little bit further. We're moving from an environment of sample assessment through to continuous data-led assurance. Yeah, these are things that we've talked about as a profession for decades, and we are now at that particular point. We're in an environment of abundance of information, so the challenge is interpreting significance in that environment. And we're in an environment where the risks are moving so quickly that the challenge for the profession will be to get close to that risk. And as a consequence, the governance of that risk is going to be reshaped as well. So from my perspective, this is the most profound moment in the history of the profession ever. It is also the most exciting moment in the history of the profession ever, and it's our challenge and our opportunity to rise up and take the mantle if we're courageous enough to do so.
I'm excited as well. I think that AI presents massive risks. Let's not kid ourselves about that. It does to humanity and to jobs, and in terms of fraud and misuse, and also what we're seeing in the world, could it be used for surveillance and control and mass weapons and all that? But I'm equally very, very excited that it opens up opportunities for the world and for us as auditors and risk professionals, if we learn how to seize them, to truly elevate the profession and do things much faster and really relegate the transactional to AI and invest more time and effort into that strategic and into the judgment, refining human judgment. I don't believe AI will replace human judgment, but it is about refining and truly amplifying our judgment. Now, Ursula, when you are working through the IIA in Luxembourg or with different clients, are you seeing that organizations are adopting AI faster than internal audit is developing the capability to challenge it?
I think it's a great question, and it is a scary question as well. Because what I recently heard actually at a conference was really don't let AI get developed faster than you can govern it. And I think that's one of the big risks here, right? I think one of the big risks is, on the one hand, as you say, Tom, it is profoundly shaping business models. On the other hand, it is profoundly shaping what data is there and what we are going to do with this data. And so it profoundly is necessary that we consider how is that governed. And this is something where we, I would say, as auditors, we have a key role here, right? We really have a key role to ensure that there is a reasonable strategy behind, there is governance behind, that we just don't do stuff. Because one of the big risks, as I see, and I also see that with clients or when you talk to people generally, is it is taken as a catch-all thing to solve whatever kind of question you want to answer where you don't know if you have the right data. Oh, we do more analytics, let's do more AI. And this is catch-all, and then the person leaves the room and nobody has the solution, right? And you believe it solves it for itself. Highly risky, where I really think that as auditors, we have to have in mind that people might take it too lightly. We also, of course, have to have in mind, as already was said by you and also by Tom, what about judgment? What about judgment? What kind of data can we have a look at? I was attending a lengthy conference over the past days, and a lot was, amongst others, about what information is going to be available, for example, to monitor what people are doing. How useful is that going to be for investigations? And where are the ethical boundaries as to what can you use? So ethical boundaries about AI is, in my view, a big thing, which totally should be as well at the front before we consider, wow, let's do more about that. So it's very much is about governance. And then, well, from the auditor's perspective, that's another animal. We might talk about that at one of your other questions. But I would say we can't allow AI to kind of overstep us in the process of how we govern, how we handle data in general.
Absolutely. I do see. So my question was, are organization adopting AI faster than internal audit? And in my work with clients, I am seeing that this is the case in some instances, and that does concern me. But I do believe that auditors will step up, and I certainly hope that auditors will step up. But I am seeing different organizations investing and audit not necessarily playing that same role. But Jihan, you're based in the Middle East, and there is a lot of adoption of AI in Middle East, and there's also bigger budgets, let's say. And I know that via mandate, by a royal decree, for example, in Saudi Arabia, where you are, and in other places in the Middle East, internal audit has been elevated and is given budgets. So from your perspective and in your part of the world, are you seeing internal audit developing the capacity and the skills and abilities to really dig into AI and keep up with what's happening in the wider organization?
I would say that Saudi Arabia is investing a lot for technology since decades. We are standing now on a big foundation regarding information, regarding data, regarding governance. We are really focused about how this new technology and tools will build the future, because Saudi usually focus on how we compete, how we are faster, how we enable the people to understand how we can use this technology to improve the organization itself. So I would say that the investment is happening heavily in these kind of tools, because will enable us to achieve our vision. Most of the organization here is rely on strong infrastructure for data, because the most challenge, as Ursula mentioned, the most challenging thing is what kind of data we have. It's like a crash data, it's like structured data, because at the end you need the information, and what kind of information that we can rely on at the end, because the information that the thing that we are using forecast to predict, to understand what happened behind, even though Tom also mentioned that we are just replacing the traditional audit to be continuous. So we are working on a real-time data. So I think we are in a revolution of changing and enable people skills to understand how we're using this data and how we can building more and more on this will be very awesome to move on, to elevate, to evolve even people on this new technology.
All right. So, Jehan, with that perspective, what do you think are like now the biggest blind spots emerging with AI? Not only with AI, but also with the data-driven decision making and automation. What do you think are some of the blind spots today?
Based on some research that I read recently, and from also the ground of experience, there is, I think, main two things regarding this. The first of all, that the management understand how this tool is very useful and will serve and adding value for the organization. So the understanding and the acceptance to having and adopting these tools. The second thing is how long we need to train our people to use these kind of things, because you are not building something from new. But it's accumulated. So how you can teach the people, the team, decide this technology working on data, privacy, ethics. There is a lot of things to build framework and governance to be like basic building blocks to move on. So I think this is the main two things.
Okay. Well, Tom, Jehan mentioned the importance of training and the time it takes, the investment it takes. So if we bring it back to the space of internal audit and knowing that internal audit typically has not been getting massive budgets, so how would you advise internal audit teams to actually make this good use of this technology within the budgets they have?
Yeah, and look, it's a very valid point. And I think the most important thing to say is that AI literacy is not a nice to have, it's an essential to have. That then will define the resource allocation within whatever budget one actually has in the business. Accepting that AI literacy is critical, it is then through both theoretical and practical. And I'm actually erring more heavily on the practical side than I am on the theoretical side. I will never be as smart as the most gifted data scientist that sits out. But from a practical side of perspective, it is going out there and trying the different models. It is understanding the differences between the different aspects of AI and automation and data analytics and the big family that all three of them sit in. It is also understanding where your organisational and team blind spots are, because that also drives the budgetary allocation as well. One of the blinds pull out, just as an aside. Well, firstly, I'll go back. Blind spots with AI sit in the gaps. They are the shadow AI. It is things like the absence of model ownership. It is things like vendor oversight. It is things like the escalation. And so if you're identifying that there are issues within your organisation and you don't have the budget to be able to accommodate those, you've got two choices. Well, you've got three choices when it comes down to it. The biggest choice is to resign. Now, I say a good auditor has their resignation in their top pocket, but assuming that you aren't, you have to go back to your board and your audit committee and your management and essentially say to them that you can't provide assurance over certain areas because you don't have the budget. So don't seek to come to us. But ultimately, it all comes back down to that education aspect. I actually think that this is that we are at the dawn not only of the AI era, we're not only at the golden dawn of data, we're at the golden dawn of control and risk education of a level that we will never see again in our lifetime. And it's incumbent upon us to, even if we have limited budgets, to be able to find a way to articulate the risks, the opportunities, the controls, the assurance and the lack thereof of the assurance in a manner that actions can be taken. Otherwise, it's just confetti to the wind.
Yes, I get asked a lot, is AI a threat to internal audit or an amplifier of its value? And I'm a firm believer that it is an amplifier of its value. And I'm also a firm believer that a lot can be done also on a shoestring budget. I speak from experience. And I want to share a story of my own experience with AI. And I want this to be like helpful to chief audit executives and audit professionals out there. I think it was like 3.5 years ago, I said to myself, this AI thing is happening. I need to learn. And I was so scared at the beginning. I really had the trepidation. I mean, I've built my career, and you think that by that stage in our career, you learned and you mastered all the technical stuff that now you really need to kind of really elevate more on relationships and alliances or whatever. But it was like going back to that drawing board. And I started teaching myself with a lot of hesitation and a lot of trepidation. And I started with the different free versions, and then I upgraded. And I'm now at a point where I really developed like an AI auxiliary brain that helps me with my work. I have my own small advisory, and I was able to get a lot more efficiencies and benefits. I developed the apps by talking to AI. And when I work with my clients, I've been guiding them through that process. And there are so many amazing tools out there that don't cost a fortune, that can strengthen the analytics, that can allow much deeper dives, help with report writing, help with judgment. In one particular case, one client we were working with, we were able to really look at the coding of some fraud assessment in a tool. And we were able to really, really, really add value to the organization. Ursula, when we look at AI and the push towards it, how would you say we remain judgment-led and don't become, you said earlier, AI now becomes like the solution, the band-aid to all problems. Everyone says, use AI, use AI. And I share your concerns about that. But how would we ensure we remain judgment-led and we don't fall into that trap of becoming too led in this AI world, particularly as auditors?
I think it's a real challenge, and it's a challenge for several reasons. For once, I think it's a generational challenge as well, because people like Tom and I, we have been educated to do things more or less manually, and to look into, external auditors say you do substantive testing. You look into, like, you don't let any stone unturned, you look in the details, and then you judge on what you see, right? And so now you're getting a generation of people coming into internal audit. That could be my kids, right? They have been trained and educated differently, right?
Sure.
And now they get all those cool new tools, and they're going to say, come on, let AI, let AI answer all those questions. So in terms of judgment, this is a different way of teaching auditors. It's an additional way of educating auditors. Okay, that's what the data tells you, and this is what you're going to make out of that. And I think what we more and more see and hear everywhere about how we make best use of AI in internal audit is let it do the boring stuff. Let it do the boring stuff. And I'm always also going to say, let's make use of the generational shift, and let's ask those young nerds, and there's a nerd in every team, right?
Yes.
Who's going to have a lot of pain points and saying, come on, I hate it to do these kind of boring things or putting my observations in a database. Fine, find me a solution to make it simpler. That's great, right? So use the pain points, let the people have fun with all that, but then teach them that next to this, judgment isn't very often black and white, and you have to understand how you assess a situation, how you listen to people, and how you build a mindset of what I see could be different. There's not such a lot of things like black and white. We have to rethink training of auditors, I would say. It's different layers of training that have to be added to the equation.
Tom, you're a big advocate and fan of AI. Give me your perspective. Share with us and with our audience your perspective about how do we remain judgment-led and not too led.
The reason for my excitement is a reinterpretation of what Ursula has just said, is that the boring stuff for me is the stuff that we, through automation and AI, we can now do at speed, that we can now do with great efficiency, that we can now identify patterns. What AI can't do, and this isn't a failing of it, it was never designed to do, it can't understand context. It can't understand ethics, and it can't understand nuances. The four of us have different ethics. It doesn't mean that any one of us have bad ethics. We just have different ethics. And so it's understanding that nature, which is so fascinating. So I think that judgment will, and always will remain of relevance. I actually talk about it when I speak to people. It's not so much automation or AI that's concerned, it's unquestioned automation or unquestioned AI that concerns me. So I cannot be more enthusiastic with regards to the impact that it's going to cause. I'm not naive to the inefficiencies that it's exposing that of our processes that were previously done. I'm not naive to that. I'm not naive to the fact that it's introducing new risks into organisations. But the train has left the station. To be honest, the train left the station 60 years ago, with Alan Turing. From that moment forward, the thinking machines, there was always going to go down this path. It's just that there's been a tundra of cobwebs for 50 years that came alive 3.5 years ago. And I think our great challenge is to apply that which has stood us in good stead, not for the last 50 years, not for the last 100 years, but for the last 2,000 years. And if you look at it, though, so some of those thematics still apply. Who's accountable? Where are the risks? What are the risks? These things don't change. What changes under AI is their speed, their evidence, their velocity, for the want of a better description. And my great concern is when I speak to and work with teams that are only focusing on the efficiency side of things.
Absolutely, that's my concern too.
Yeah, what I say to them is that you have to look at, I actually call it the 3 E's. The efficiency side, which is fine. If you want to write the report faster, that's great. That's okay. But if it doesn't lead to the more effective management of risk within your organisation, or the more effective management assurance of that management of risk within your organisation, then you've got to ask yourself what you're doing about it. And the last thing, as we've talked about, is around education. And it's not education just on the tools, it's an education on the positives, the negatives. It's a reminder of governance, things of that nature. And it is the last thing I'll say, this is an issue probably for the first time in risk and the first time in assurance, at least in my career, perhaps even much longer than that, is that it's jurisdictionally agnostic. You can go to South Africa or Finland, you can go to Chile or London, you can go to Melbourne or Moscow, and everyone's confronting a variation of the same issues. And all I can say is what an extraordinarily exciting time then to be in a profession that is one of the great trust advisors within an organisation. Trust is built on assurance. Assurance is built on verification. We are the verifiers, the independent verifiers within an organisation. We have the opportunity to not just be passive bystanders, but to be at the very centre of the next iteration of whatever we're just walking into.
Okay, great. What about you, Gshyhan? In your perspective and from your experience, how would auditors remain judgment-led, not tool-led in this AI world?
I believe we are coming from different backgrounds. So when we look at the team from strategic thinking as chief audit, we have people coming from like finance background, some of people coming from IT, even people coming from IT, they need to be educated. So I think it's a time just to be open for education. Just feeling to be open to the education. It's not just to go back to the classroom and study from zero or from scratch. No, it's as I mentioned, the knowledge is accumulated. So maybe a reading paper, attending like seminars, having like advisor coming to your organization and give you or share knowledge, or maybe we can see the best practice, because I believe that there is some of organization in Saudi Arabia, they are fully automated and fully AI working on audit, and they have awesome results. But from my perspective, I think this is still a start of point. We still need to understand how we can move from like providing assurance to be a strategic advisor. These kind of things, it's not an easy decision to make it for time being. I think we are partially just ready, because we need to understand, because there is a lot of work behind. We need to educate the team. You need to just redefine what kind of process, how we move to fully continuous audit, how we can build a governance module. Fraud is one of the most important thing. We cannot ignore it. So to make all these things combined, I think we need some time. I think we need in a support with the IIA. In the near future, we can understand how we can to reach a point. We can just be plugged with the AI, fully automated with all the process, starting from the planning, from just providing evidence and have analyzing, especially when we are talking about the mega project, which is contain a lot of contract, a lot of number, money, this kind of thing. So I think we have to be patient with ourselves, with our team, and think about what the organization it needs for time being, and start step by step to reach a point that we are confident about what we are doing.
Great. Before we continue, may I ask a favor? Many people listening to Impact Legacy with Rania on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and Amazon haven't yet subscribed. So if you're enjoying this conversation, please hit follow or subscribe now. It takes a second, costs nothing, and really helps the podcast grow. Okay, so all three of you have talked about education in one way or another. The three of you. And I would echo that, and I would definitely endorse the very importance of education and organizations investing in the education. But also I would like to underline the importance of personal responsibility. Because when we start engaging with AI, we can get sucked into an echo chamber very easily, where AI is always saying, yes, you're right. Yes, AI's job is really, unless we specifically ask it to, stress test or challenge our assumptions, which very, very few people do. All it does is kind of reinforce the idea, and it's very easy to become blinded to certain aspects. And so from my message to anyone listening to us is, AI is amazing and I'm excited about AI, but an AI offers a lot of opportunities for automation, for acceleration, for efficiency, for, AI can analyze, it can synthesize, but it cannot empathize. It cannot read the room. It cannot remember the history. It cannot, unless we fed it the history, it cannot know what's going on in the macroeconomic environment, in the industry, in the organization. And so we need to have a personal responsibility ourselves to stay connected to what's going on, to join the dots, and to truly, deploy our critical thinking by taking that step back, by joining the dots, by understanding the context, and reading the room, reading the people, and exercising our human-centered skills, be it the empathy, the relationship building, the communication, the influence. Because for me, this is really what builds a strategic business partner, that trusted advisor. For me, trust is really born from the personal relationships, first and foremost, and before the data. Of course, we need the quality. We need data gives us the certainty in our conclusion. It gives us depth and scope and breadth to our analysis to be able to have more insightful conversations with management. But we need ourselves to retain that critical thinking ability and educate ourselves. If we all start outsourcing our judgment and thinking to AI, then we're doomed, to be honest. We're really doomed. Now, Jihan, you raised fraud. So I'd like to ask you, Tom, when we look about AI and the evolution of AI, one of the emerging risks is all the clones, synthetic IDs, cloning voice, cloning image, And also we have now these ghost GPTs and fraud GPTs, and this fraternity between fraudsters, that AI is putting fraud on steroids, and the number of authorized push payments that are fraudulent is massive. What would be your advice to audit and risk and fraud and compliance teams in terms of strengthening their capability for audit vigilance in the future?
Yeah, look, it's a very good question. And I always start with accepting, getting them to accept that we're in a new world of scale, speed, and realism. There is still a bit of a denial in organisations and in fraud, audit, and risk and compliance teams that we are in a world where fake evidence is so good that it's impossible to discern its heritage or otherwise with regards to it. So it's accepting that it is existing. Deception has been a base level human emotion since the days of the hieroglyphics, and so it hasn't changed, and it's always been ahead of those who seek to dismantle it. That is happening again here now, but we're just seeing it happen at a much greater speed. So I come back to three things. One is education, which we've talked a lot about. So exposing yourself and indeed creating the false evidence. See how easy it is to create the false evidence, the crumpled invoice and the artificially generated or the synthetic voice and things of that nature. So the first one is education. The second part that I've said to teams is with regards to the fraud awareness is, again, to learn from others' mistakes. So it is to be very open globally to see what the new trends are. And not only the trends, but I would actually go one step further, to look for the convergences. Because of speed, what is happening? Because of scale, what is happening? So the scale is the trend, but when you put scale and speed together, that's the convergence of the issues. And that's something that one really needs to be focusing on. And I think that then it comes back down to the fraud triangle, just revisiting the existing frameworks and seeing their applicability or otherwise to this new environment. I happen to be of the school of thought that the fraud triangle is so strong in its construction that it will be very helpful again, to explain things. And I think that the best way that I can articulate it is a variation on the most famous verification phrase of the last 50 years, and that's come out of audit. It's come out of nuclear disarmament with Gorbachev and Reagan, which was trust but verify. And then the flip side is don't trust until verify. And that's, I think, where organisations and teams really need to focus in on things, is if you can't verify, you can't trust it. And you have to find ways to verify it. And as I've said, that is easier said than done. But again, that is the opportunity that's being presented to fraud, compliance, and risk teams globally.
Okay.
Well said.
Jd'han, since you've raised the point about fraud, what are you seeing in terms of internal audit building the capabilities to be able to detect a fraud better? And probably not just audit, but let's talk audit, risk management, compliance, fraud teams.
I would say that we cannot just build something without having skepticism in our personality. Any auditors, they have this specific emotion about understanding what's happening on behind, okay? And they can read between lines. So when we come up with the fraud, we already understand in each of core business what's happening, because we building a long relationship with the business. We understand. Let's say we are working on like pharmaceutical business or retail business or banking sector. So these kind of industries, they have a history, so we understand even from the historical a transaction or something published on magazine, because auditors is engaging on information with management, with transaction, with what's happening worldwide. So from this perspective, he understands how what kind of process he need to include it in on his continuous audit or whatever he is doing with the AI. So I think the basic thing is the auditor itself, because at the end it's under his supervision.
Okay.
So the human being is the asset here. It's not the
Okay.
AI.
All right. And Ursula, what other risks that you see emerge other than fraud that you see emerging with AI that you would advise auditors to get to know and understand better so that they can manage them?
Before I answer that question, can I applaud Jihan?
Sure. Of course.
Because what you just said, I even noted it down because I couldn't agree more. All my trainings on ethics, I always basically finish them with basically what you said. Our professional skepticism starts with us. It starts with being professionally skeptical towards our own judgment, right? As auditors specifically, because we have sort of kind of there's the expectations that we are kind of the guardian of integrity, but still we have our own biases. As you said, I mean, everyone has his biases personal, right?
Yes.
And we have to be super mindful about that. And also we have to be super mindful that we are kind of not, that there's no an over expectation about auditors will know how to judge. No, I mean, we're just human beings in progress like everyone else. And we have to keep professional skepticism about us. So in terms of other emerging trends, risk, whatever, I do believe I think we can't overemphasize on the risk of all things fraud and blind spots in organization, driven amongst others by all things AI, because we have this double-edged sword of speed, which is great, right? Because you can pass, you said it yourself, Rania, you can pass billions of transactions like in no time, and then the money's gone. And you have cross-border transactions which go in no time, and then the money is gone. On the other hand, it gives you way less time nowadays to intercept.
Yes.
So all the monitoring roles and compliance in particular, they have less time to look for anomalies of SARS, right? Suspicious activities. There's less time for that. So that's a massive risk. It's great that we have all these opportunities for large-scale transactions, and on the other hand, it puts each and every organization at risk. So that's, for me, a massive thing where we have to go back to one thing which we discussed earlier in this round, and this is silos and blind spots. And we have to be totally aware who looks into what and who looks potentially not into what, and where do we see the boundaries of what we do in our role, be it audit, be it compliance, risk, whatever it is, and are we sure that we also look above those boundaries? Because the blind spots start where I say, okay, my role stops at my doorstep and I don't see how it impacts what someone else does in my organization. Here's where the risks sit. And that's where fraudsters and where systems basically pick up. So highly risky. One more thing on, can I go back to what Tom said? Because you said about AI, there's basically, it's across countries, jurisdictions, globe, actually. It's everywhere. There's another thing which I think plays in our hand, also as auditors, and that's regulation picks up those risks across the globe. I'm not a lawyer, but if you read about basic changes in regulation, be it EU, the US, wherever, in the UK, everywhere, I'm less familiar about Australia, Tom, but it is everywhere. The question of resilience of organizations is picked up as a kind of bottom line everywhere. And that means, well, if you want to have better resilience in an organization, you have to look, above or on the other side of your doorstep or what you're doing and say, okay, how do we work together? This is totally basically like it gives you a goal to throw the ball in and say, okay, here's my start to say, how do we work better together? And so, and that we don't only have to embrace that, but it's an obligation. Just sitting there and waiting until it happens, the regulator is not going to tolerate that. And if we as auditors say, okay, we need more budget, we need more resources, how we can do that, that's our argument.
Okay, I agree with everything that you're saying, but I heard once fraudsters move at the pace of money and institutions move at the pace of law. And the pace of law is much slower
Mhm.
than the pace of
Mhm.
fraudsters. In my opinion, we need, as auditors and risk professionals, compliance, etc., to learn to think like the fraudster. Now, obviously, we have our ethical and integrity compass that does not make us fraudsters, but we really need to think like them
Mhm.
and to have that agility and that nimbleness.
Mhm.
One of the big concerns I have is that coming back to what was said earlier about generational gaps, is a lot of organizations, boards, tend to be more advanced in age and not have a lot of young, youthful element in those boards. And maybe there are some exceptions in some parts of the world, but generally they tend to be more advanced in age. And that means they are not really the tech generation, the AI generation. And so I see an important role for audit risk governance professionals, leaders, to step up, to really bring this conversation, to really make them aware of what's
Mhm.
going on.
Mhm.
And that resilience starts at the top, and resilience
Mhm.
starts with the resilient boards. But if the board is not nimble enough, is not taking the right decisions at the right time, is
Mhm.
not addressing the important things. By board, I also include CEO, the
Mhm.
CFO. I see a role for audit and risk to actually drive that
Mhm.
conversation in the business. Coming back to you, Ursula, do you think should internal audit be leading that conversation around AI governance, or just auditing what others have designed in terms of governance?
I think there's one risk that internal audit cannot take. It's basically that, as you say, the oversight body, whatever that is, will throw the thing on audit's desk and saying that, well, okay, structure how we have to look into that. That's one mistake, which, I mean, it's a trap we can't fall in, because number one, we're always losing. We're always going to be lose. And number two, because I think organizations, number one, need a baseline of what do they have to protect? What do they want to protect, right? And on that basis follows, based on all sorts of external drivers about regulation and God knows what, and internal drivers, where do we want to go? Where do we stand right now? Where's our business going? How advanced is the business digitally, whatever. From there goes, what kind of governance do we need? And this is it's defined on the one. It has to be defined, in my view, by first and foremost an oversight body. What kind of risks are we ready to take? And this is not up to internal audit to define that, in my view. But internal audit can very well help steering this discussion. If you ask me, should we steer this? I'm not sure we should steer that, but we should have a very strong seat at the table on that, because we have a lot to add, and because we sound out basically how the organization ticks, sometimes way better than a board can, of course, because they're far. And I think here's our key value.
So if I summarize what you said, you're saying actually internal audit should not define an AI governance framework. We should audit what others design.
Internal audit is there to design the governance. I would
Okay.
say we are part of this. We should be a strong place, and we should have a strong seat at the table to steer that. But I would still consider that it is up to the oversight body to be at the front line of what kind of governance does this company need and want to have.
I want to hear from you, Tom and Jehan, on this. In terms of the IIA standards, they talk about playing a bigger role in advisory. And this is a momentous time, as you yourself said earlier, Tom. And so should we take a step and let them design and we come and audit, or do we play an active role in driving this? Let's start with you, Tom. What do you say?
So I actually think that this moment in our history as a profession, we are going to have to confront some of the most essential conversations that we as a profession have ever had to focus on. And one of them is independence. What is independence? And how does independence play out in terms of theory and also in terms of practice? Now, I'm very much of the school of Ursula's view that we should be providing counsel, not necessarily designing the governance frameworks, and that's for the governance of the organisation to do so. But ultimately, that is a view that we all have been brought up in because that's what we've been educated in. I wonder what the market, and by this I call the market of governance within organisations, within societies, is going to be expecting of us. And that will then change or force a significant change upon us or not. It may be that it makes our role smaller. God forbid that it does make it smaller, but I suspect it will make it larger. So I think we've got this, we as a profession, whatever the aspects of whatever the issues we're talking about, is actually going to force us to consider existential risks and existential issues about the longevity of the profession. I think the Institute of Internal Audit has a very important role to play in that, but they are, and without saying it in a disrespectful way, they are but one stakeholder. There are as many other stakeholders that have to have their views, whether it's regulators, whether it's the parliaments and the congresses of our countries and things of that nature. I then move forward to if that's the theoretical or the macro issues, I then move forward to, well, how can I understand within the organisation? And one thing that I'm seeing a great rejuvenation of, and perhaps driven a lot by me yelling at people to rejuvenate it, is the assurance map. And the assurance map for me is so powerful because it actually identifies a lot of the issues that we're talking about. It's a dispassionate framework to be able to say, what is the risk and what is the risk that you are defining, because someone else has defined it differently. If we can't define that risk, whatever that risk may be, whether it be non-AI or non-AI, we have profound issues. And then I go down, obviously, through the layers and identify it. But then even that brings profound existential conversations. The literature that I write and the literature that I read, the most controversial area is, should there be 3 lines of defence? And we see emerging of perhaps line 2 and 3, and perhaps, and this is this will probably get me shot, but I need to say it, perhaps lines 1 and 3 being merged together in one way, shape or form. And I think that we as a profession need to be having these conversations. I'm not smart enough to know the answers to these questions, but I am dumb enough to be able to ask the questions. And I think that's a really important way to phrase it. And I think that ultimately I'm reminded, I heard it on a podcast just a couple of weeks ago about the calculator. The calculator originally started as a person in an organisation. That was the name of a person in an organisation, pre-computers. Then computers comes along and it becomes something different. And now we've all got calculators on our phone. And so the definition of a calculator has changed over time. The definition of an auditor has historically changed over time and will continue to change over time. It's whether we resist or embrace. And I'm very much of the school of embracing.
Yes. Jd'Han, what do you think? Would audit be driving AI governance conversations or just auditing what others design?
Okay, maybe I will have different scenario from Ursula and Tom, because we are dealing with the governance framework here in Saudi in a very high scale. We are dealing with this as something, let's say, a main national authority. They are working on doing governance framework. So we have a different layer. So we will start from the governmental body. So they have multiple of key responsibility, like setting national data and AI strategy, developing AI governance framework and policies, establish ethical principle for AI, overseeing data and AI initiative across all the kingdom. So we have multiple of governmental body that they are working seriously with these kind of things and taking like a serious initiative. And the other things, it's from the organization itself. They are working on the governance and be comply with government requirement. At the end, also making these policies and procedure and other things, it's comply with the organizational need. So we have different scenario here in Saudi Arabia. We are dealing with the government body and the organization itself. So we have different perspective here.
Okay. I agree. It is not the role of internal audit to define the framework. I believe this is a great opportunity for audit and risk and compliance to shape the future. In my opinion, we leverage this by driving the conversation, by for once not being in the passenger seat of the car, but actually, as this is a momentous event that AI is happening, that we are there driving those conversations, building awareness about emerging risks, talking about the opportunities that AI brings, and shaping, influencing, and leading the conversation around governance, even if it's not us writing it, but us making sure that people listen. And this would truly elevate the role of audit risk compliance in the eyes of management if we have organizations introduce continuous assurance and continuous control monitoring. How would that change the expectation of internal audit, and what role would internal audit play? Tom?
Well, look, I start with the acceptance that we have to move towards continuous assurance, and we have to move towards it not in 10 years, not in 5 years, but in 18 months, 6 months. And the reason why I call that out is one only has to look at the profound changes that have gone through the software engineering world in the last 6 months. And I think that we're probably going to have that condensed time frame.
Yes.
So with that in mind, it is then the role of internal audit in that environment is one, to provide comfort that the continuous assurance being undertaken by management is defendable and transparent, but then our independent continuous assurance is adding value in a way that it should be. And I think the third thing with regards to continuous assurance, continuous assurance without continuous learning is a waste of time. So continuous assurance that is corrective and reforming, we need to put in place things that continuous assurance will produce 1,000 action items, but if no one's actioning those action items, that's a complete waste of time, and it's noise in an environment where noise is a cruelty. And so we need to work out a way that we prioritize those exceptions that really matter. We have to look at it both at the process and the outcome. We have to look at it both in terms of data existence and data quality, and we have to look at it in terms of its a relationship and its marriage with the assurance that's otherwise being done elsewhere. So in summary, I don't think that we have the luxury of 10 years to have this conversation. I think we've got the luxury probably until Christmas of 2026 to be able to do it. And even within that space, I actually hope that an Anthropic through Claude or someone of that nature brings out an add-on that actually allows continuous assurance to be developed in a manner that we 6 months ago would have thought was impossible, because that's exactly the issues that our cousins in software engineering are confronting right now.
That's very interesting. It's interesting that you say that we've got to Christmas. By working with different clients, I do see that in many organizations, the pace of advancement is not as fast as that. And I'm not talking about audit. I'm talking about the business itself. From your perspective, Łursula, again, if we talk about continuous control monitoring and continuous assurance, what role will audit play in the future other than just checking the exceptions?
I do believe audit can play a very, very strong role, and has to play a strong role in helping the organization looking into how do we look at risk in general. Because you can have whatever kind of beautiful model and software behind and God knows what, and say, well, here's our assurance map and that's what we're going to do. But still, we have to have a baseline of how do we look at risk and which risks are we looking into it and who looks into which risk, right? So it starts again with assurance map, but here again, looking into where are our blind spots, what might we have, what might we have overlooked. This is all about how an organization, what's the attitude towards risk? And I think where we really can help steering this conversation is, again, making clear there's no such thing like, well, that's your risk and that's my risk, right? So risk is something which concerns an organization, whatever risk it is. And that's really a discussion that I think where we can be good at to steer it, because we see it every single day. I'm always saying there's in terms of risk, right? Be it fraud or whatever, everyone in the organization is your stakeholder. There's no one that isn't your stakeholder, because everyone is somehow concerned. And no one but internal audit can see it that way, because we speak to so many people and we see the impact of risk across roles.
Yes.
And that's, I mean, the vision of how do we see risks and how do we corner the risk as an organization, for me, is the starting point. Before we even consider, okay, do we have until Christmas, Tom, or do we have until summer next year to see how does our assurance model play out?
Okay. And Gihan, if as AI is evolving and unfolding, what skills do you think will be non-negotiable for auditors in this technology accelerated world?
I would say understanding data. This is the most important thing that we need for this time. And just to conclude, I'm really happy to have AI, because you cannot imagine auditors how they suffer, because they have a lot of work to do. And spending hours, spending weekends doing a lot of work, analyzing data, reading paper, comparing, doing a lot of things with Excel. So it's not, it's crazy work. But now when we have the AI, it's like someone like supporting me. It's like minimizing the time. It's speeding. For time being, it's like crazy to having this support. I'm really happy and appreciating the people that they are working for the last decade about these tools. And at the end, it's tools to support me. We cannot rely on it. So the answer for your question, that data. It's the main key.
All right. Okay. Tom, what are your pearls of wisdom for the auditors listening to us today?
Well, look, there's probably two things I'd say is that we're all learning as we go through the process. And my encouragement to everyone that's listening to this today is to just try and get out there and understand the different models, the different processes, break things and then not. The other thing I'd say is it's an extraordinary privilege to be us all at this stage of our careers, wherever we are, to be in the profession that we've all committed our lives to at this. What an extraordinary privilege it is to be close witness to our own industrial revolution. Very few generations get this opportunity, and let's not waste it.
Wonderful. Ursula?
Well, I can pick up on Tom. Well, thank you for giving me the idea on that. No, but on that basis, I think two things that stand out that we can't do without. Nobody can, but certainly internal auditors know we have to be, number one, very adaptive, right? We have to be flexible. So that's one of the baseline elements of resilience of an organization, is to be adaptive, to see, okay, what works, what does not work, let's try, and then let's change, right? So it's a mindset of innovation, and we need that. We have to be adaptive, and we have to be collaborative. Because none of us, I mean, not an auditor, but certainly no one in an organization can achieve to handle all those never-ending challenges. Nobody gets it done on their own or his or her own. So we have to be collaborative. And here's also where all things tech and AI will not help. So that's where it goes back to human beings at work. Where that's the most important thing that we, in my view, cannot forget. This is human beings at work. And without human beings collaborating on all these things, we're not going to achieve anything. Right? So let's not forget that.
Okay, wonderful. Gihan?
I would say that we are teaching and adding a prompt for all AI module. And at the same time, we are learning from them. So it's like a mutual, things that we do. It's a journey. We have to be open. We have to be accepting if something wrong happened. And as Ursula said, it's well said. We have to be adaptive for any change happening, and just be relaxed, whatever happening during this journey.
Wonderful. Well, here are my closing comments. First of all, it's wonderful to have you all here and to have this rich conversation. And for all the auditors out there and risk professionals and other leaders and maybe board members listening, whoever it is that is listening to us today, we are at a crossroads. We definitely are at a crossroad, and this is a momentous time in history. And AI presents many challenges. It presents risks. It may lead to new emerging risks that we have not even thought about. It will suck up money, and it may amplify fraud. And it may threaten jobs, and it may threaten the livelihood of many. But also, it is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for humanity to innovate, to change, to elevate, to to increase efficiency and create space for new things. And when it comes to us in our profession, in the audit and risk and governance profession, I believe that this is a once in a lifetime opportunity for us to truly step up, to use this technology to amplify our influence and our impact. And I want to share with our auditors, with our audience, what I always said about audit. The secret for successful audit is about always coming back to the basics and not getting lost or overwhelmed in the many layers and the details. And the smart auditors are the ones who take all the complex and simplify it into simple, back to basics. And I would encourage all the auditors not to be overwhelmed, but to actually bring their thinking back to the basics around what AI does, how to manage it, how to use it, how to govern it, how to leverage it, and how we can turn it into a strategic sparring partner. How can it become our own strategic partner, just like we want to be a strategic partner for the business. And yes, AI literacy, AI usage, and leverage of data is very important, but we really need to remember that at the end of the day, the most important thing is the human. And so come back to our humanity, leverage and deploy our critical thinking, our strategic thinking, our empathy, our resilience, our flexibility and adaptability. The only thing that matters is our ability to be able to be agile and nimble, to evolve, to learn, to take risks, to be curious and courageous, and to really be flexible, resilient, and capable of reinventing ourselves. And we stand at a point where we are able to reinvent ourselves. So use AI, make sure you're up to date, and share this conversation and share your ideas. If we've missed anything, please share the conversation so that we can enrich everyone. Tom, Ursula, Jihan, a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you so much for your time and for your contributions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
If today's conversation resonated with you when you're looking to increase your influence, strengthen your readiness for AI and emerging risks, or have me share this perspective at your next event, I'd love to help. You can find all the details to reach me for advisory, mentoring, training, or speaking in the show notes below, and as well as the details of my guests. Let's connect and explore how we can build your impact and legacy together. Thank you for tuning in, and to the next episode of Impact Legacy with me, Rania. Thank you for tuning in to Impact Legacy with Rania. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe or follow so you never miss an episode, and click the bell to be notified of new releases. If this inspired you, please pass it on. Your likes, comments, and shares help us reach more people, because together we can grow this journey of influence, impact, and legacy.